Jim from Advanced Performance Shooting again. And earlier this week, in an unrelated video production, I talked about the lie that is the trigger finger. And it got so much attention in that small group I was working in that I thought we might as well do a quick rangeside chat so I can tell you what I think is the absolute lie that is the trigger finger. Throughout history, we have tried to tell people, we've tried to tell students that how you manipulate the trigger on a handgun is going to cause an impact and where that bullet hits downrange. You can even find commercially produced targets that would tell you if the rounds go over here, too much finger. If they go over here, not enough finger. What a bunch, holy smoke. I have even heard people tell students that you're pressing the trigger at an angle to get the gun to fire. No, it's not your trigger finger. What you do with this finger is not overpowering the other 7 fingers in both of your thumbs. You're gripping the gun wrong. I don't care how you put necessarily the placement of your grip. The most important part is your grip doesn't change while you're causing the gun to fire. The simple truth is you have to point the gun at the target, cause it to go bang, without moving it from that desired point of impact. So for today's stuff, I'm using the TPC Flinch Grinch target. A 1-inch circle with a 1/4 of an inch border all the way around it. Great target. We're shooting it right at 3.5, 4 yards. But we're going to look at some of the lies that we've heard and redirect them back towards where we should be calling that problem. So across this top row, I'm going to fire the gun as traditionally as I can. The pad of my index finger centered on the trigger, pressing the trigger, if you will, straight to the rear. Never came out of contact with the trigger, reset it in recoil, and I did everything right on the trigger. And we're 100%, we met the standard with that particular set of targets. This time, I'm going to put a different portion of my finger or a different finger altogether on the trigger for each and every shot. So there's traditional placement, as much finger as I can fit, as little a finger. I'm going to switch to my middle finger, then I'm going to switch to my pinky finger. And again, in that middle row, we 100% met the standard that we were trying to achieve with a different finger or a different portion of my finger on the trigger for each and every shot. The key was I didn't change my grip. Every gun doesn't fit everybody's hand the same. If you grip the gun slightly different for whatever reason, you're going to change the placement of your trigger finger. It doesn't matter. The key part is that we don't change our grip while we're actually firing that shot. There's a second portion to the lie that is the trigger finger, if you will, and that we think somehow, somewhere, somebody said, oh, you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way. I've heard words like the gun should surprise you when it goes off. I don't want a surprise on the range. I don't want that. That's often followed by, oh, did I do that? I want to point the gun at the target and make it go bang when it's pointed where I want the bullet to go. It can't be a surprise. I have to make it happen when it's supposed to happen. I've heard press the trigger. I've heard you're jerking the trigger. I've heard squeeze the trigger. I've heard don't slap the trigger. It doesn't matter what we're doing on the trigger as long as we're not changing our grip. So I've hung another TPC target, and we're going to talk briefly about another extension or an extension of what I think is the lie that is the trigger finger. I've heard press, I've heard prep, I've heard squeeze, I've heard don't jerk the trigger, I've heard you're slapping the trigger, and no, it doesn't matter. Point the gun at the target where you want the bullet to go, and don't move it until the bullet goes there. It's simple. It's not easy to do. I'll give it that. It takes some practice. But in part, shooters are struggling, they have struggled, because they've misidentified the problem. They're not fixing the real problem. They have not identified the fact that it's their grip that's wrong. So we're going to look at, we've been told, like I fired that first group, centered up on the target. Stay in contact with the trigger and ride it to reset it and recoil. All those things are appropriate. This time I'm going to come off the trigger, stay inside the trigger guard, but I'm going to come off the trigger as far as I can inside the trigger guard, as fast as I can, and set myself up for the next shot. I came off the trigger every time, as far off the trigger as I could possibly go. I just didn't change my grip when I was setting those shots. We more than met the standard on the top row, because we did it 100% correct, if you will. But in that middle row, if I was on the support side of that shooter, it might look like they're slapping the trigger. But on this bottom row of targets, I'm purposefully going to slap the trigger. And on that bottom row of 1-inch circles, I still 100% met the standard because I didn't change my grip. Doesn't matter how I manipulate the trigger. That's a big lie. It matters what I do with my grip. There's lots we could talk about grip. How much, how little, what way. The important thing is your grip doesn't change when you're sending that shot down range.